Solo. So I'm a split personality. I'm a composer and I'm an improviser. And a lot of my life has been trying to work these two things together to try to figure out how to incorporate improvisation and composition into the same thing. I stood up this morning trying to figure out how to do an improvised lecture on improvising. And I did it 5 or 6 times, and I realized that this little thing I wrote a couple of years ago was actually better than anything I improvised. And that's the occasional argument for composing. So I'm going to start off by reading you that little article. It's short. My career is based on an inability to be creative and repetitive. That may seem paradoxical for a person trained as a percussionist, but it's true. Virtually every performance I've ever given, be it a theater work, a dance composition, or a concert, has some element of improvisation in it. It doesn't matter if the music is performed live or recorded, there will always be at least some element of improvisation in there somewhere. Let me discuss some of the reasons why that's true. First, I ought to offer a definition of improvisation. Improvisation is the act of making music that is not pre-planned or pre-composed. There are varying degrees of improvisation ranging from, at one end, free improv, where your goal is to play only things on your instrument that no one in the world has ever played before, to the other end, kind of blues-based jamming, where you sort of have a playbook of options and you select one from column A and one from column B, and then you fit them together into a pre-existing structure. There's a place for every kind of improv on the continuum from free to structured. Each takes a lot of skill and a lot of practice that aren't part of the non-improvising musician's life. At one level, every good performer learns to improvise. We've all seen it. Equipment breaks, cues are dropped, mistakes are made. Improv is the duct tape and spit that patches all of it together and makes a seamless show for the audience. So I say, I might as well capitalize on that and make improvisation a vital part of the show. Improv is looking at things in your peripheral vision. You only see a blurry bit of the facts at the time, but the more improv one does, the better one gets at focusing on the edges. Also, the pursuit of perfection, it's overrated. I've done non-improvised, completely written out shows that are perfect. So, I've been there, I've done that. And then the next night, oh, maybe I can do it again. At a certain level, the pursuit of perfection and perfect performance becomes a law of diminishing returns. A much more interesting approach to me has been to allow more improvisation into my sets. The more improvisation I incorporate into my live performances, the better I seem to appeal to audiences. There's something magical that happens between an audience and a live performer. There is a real interconnection when each one's reaction spurs the other onto greater heights. The musician plays, the audience reacts. The musician incorporates the audience reactions and plays more. The audience reacts to the new playing, and so on. It resembles a really good conversation where each person is constantly reacting to the thoughts of the other. The trust force that binds me as a performer to my audience allows me to perform at a higher level than would be possible without an audience. At one level, I'm working without a net, taking chances without really knowing if they'll work or not. Every improviser fails at some point. As a matter of fact, most fail regularly. Personally, I consider about a 50% success rate for the improvisation to be a really good performance. The other 50%, it's not a total loss or anything. It's just that you don't discover something new and there's no magic as a result. That's the downside of improvising, a high failure rate, especially if you're really taking chances. But it's that successful 50% that really makes the evening come alive. The successful improvisation is much better than the player could ever be with written music. But the trust of the audience provides another sort of net. When the performer can sense that the audience is going along, enjoying the risks that the performer is taking, the improviser is ready to take greater risks. The comfort level allows the performer and audience to laugh off the failures and appreciate the successes. For me, that creates an incredible rush and release that's positively addicting. I can't imagine ever giving up the improv. Now, to illustrate that, I'm going to do a little piece. This is a piece I composed a couple of years ago. And first I'm just going to do it, and then I'm going to explain the score, which is very simple. It's called Way Too Many Cowbells. The score for that piece is performer takes suitcase filled with between 15 and 30 cowbells, dumps it onto a table, plays it with whatever sticks they can find, doesn't lift any of them off the table, knocks them off as they want to. The piece is over when all the cowbells have been knocked off. And that's the piece. And needless to say, it's really different every time, except that it always has way too much cowbell.
Works best with a concrete floor, too.
I know, that's really great. I got kind of a padded table, and that's kind of nice because they get really irritating on like a concrete table, but on the floor it's good. Maybe I should do one just on the floor. I think what I'm going to do now is just kind of talk about some of the instruments that I play. Some people call me like an instrument builder and an instrument designer. And I do build instruments and I do design instruments. But for me, it's not really the major thing that I do. If I have a piece that I have to write that I'm hearing in my head or I'm commissioned to play, and the audience, you know, if there's an existing instrument that will do that, I'll just use that instrument. There's no real reason to create an instrument. The only reason I create an instrument is if I can't find the sound of that instrument in existence. So I have to create something to make that sound or similar to that sound. I do a lot of live theater, and in live theater, created instruments are really cool because they add to the dramatics of the situation. So I tend to create a lot for theater. Plus, they don't have a lot of money, so you know they won't let me hire a string quartet like I'd like. So I have to learn how to play violin, and I have to figure out some way to do those sort of sounds. This is not violin. This is a set of rice bowls in different sizes, and they're actually tuned in an Indonesian scale. I spent 6 months going to every Asian store in Atlanta with a tuner, hunting for individual bowls to play in the intervals I wanted. And you can actually tune them a little bit by putting water into them, but this is kind of the way they are playing, and I kind of like them as they are. And what I usually do along with this one is do overtone singing, which is a form of singing from tuba in various other countries, in which you manipulate your voice to do different overtones. So it sounds like this. That I'm really proud of. This is called the Golden Apple, and I invented this. It's a combination of a couple of different instruments. There's a Brazilian instrument called a berimbau, which is a big bow and arrow with a gourd on it. And you play it by hitting the string with a stick, and you move the gourd up and away from your body, which changes the resonance. I love that instrument. However, it's a pain to travel with. It's a large bow, and it's got an incredibly breakable gourd on the end. So I toured with one for a while and just finally gave up and said, I really want this sound, but I can't deal with that instrument. So this kind of does this. It's a little apple ornament I found in a thrift shop with a string attached to it, and it's got a back open like this, so you can still do that sort of wah-wah thing, and it sounds like this. So I guess that one I created because of size. This one I can take no credit for at all. This is a theremin. It's a 1920s electronic instrument. And you play it by just moving your hands in the air. One hand does the pitch, and the other hand over here does the volume. Together, they sound like this. The joke about the theremin is it's the easiest instrument in the world to play. However, being able to really play it and hit pitches with it takes a long time. And if you want to get weird with it, you can play it with guitar pedals. The last instrument I want to talk about is this guy here. because people want to know about this a lot. This is a box I built. This is called the NatSot 1. The reason it's called that, that's a film term for natural sound on tape. And it's the background sound that they use, the natural sound in movies. And I wanted to build a box that would let me do a lot of weird kind of sound ambiances and sound effects. And so I built this box to do that. It has a lot of different instruments on it, obviously. It has a little kalimba. And it has a nail violin. And it has this little Vietnamese instrument. And you change the pitch by moving this around. This is the most expensive thing on it, and I didn't make it. This is a crotale. It's a tuned bell that's used in classical music. This is a piece of an instrument called a flexitone that changes pitch when you shake it. But in this case, it's just mounted so that I can bow it. It's kind of an acoustic theorem. And there's lots of springs all over this that do different things. There is... On the back of the kalimba, I had all these leftover things, and I thought, well, I needed something that kind of bounces around and changes pitch. So I made these little circles with weights on them. And over here is my kind of wind and water collection. This is a magnet. This is an aluminum container that's filled with steel BBs. So when I put the magnet on it, the BBs are attracted to it. This is a wheel off a child's tricycle, and it has a little hollow tube thing on it that's filled with quail shot. So I can kind of do these and run these into my laptop. And I can do different sounds with them that way as well. This I forgot to tell you about. This is a trombone mouthpiece. It runs into the box where there's a funnel projecting it into the box. Inside the box, there's 4 different contact pickups in different places to pick up various parts of the instruments on it. There's also a very small amplifier that feeds back into there so that I can do feedback sounds as well. And that's the box. And that's really all I've got here. So I'm done. I'll be happy to answer any questions about the ways to do this and whatever you guys might want to know, if there are any. Yeah.
What is the device that you have up there that you're controlling the sound with, and what computer program are you using?
I'm running Ableton Live, and I am running a bunch of VSTs and some Max programs I wrote on there. So that's how I'm processing sound.
Does a Mac OS?
What?
Is it Macintosh?
Yeah, but Ableton runs on both PCs and
Okay.
Macs, so you can do either. This is called a Nano Control. It's a very cheap little cord controller. They're well under $100, and I'm just using that to manipulate the different things I've programmed into this. Yeah.
What's that circular thing right in front of you?
Oh. That's another thing I didn't make. That's called a Hansonic. It's a percussion synthesizer. It's kind of old now, but I still like it, mostly because it does cool toggles. But let's take it to something without that effect. You know, it does a bunch of different kind of... a bunch of little drums. These were kind of built for people who were doing touring theater shows, and so it's kind of a pit group, because one of the big problems when you're doing a theater show as a percussionist is the score may call for 47 instruments and they only have space in the pit for 20 instruments. So you always kind of trying to grab things and hang things from the ceiling and that kind of stuff. But this sort of lets me do good enough version of about 20 or 30 different percussion instruments all in a box. So that's what it's for.
Are there a lot of other musicians and artists that do similar things as you? And then you talked about the noise festivals. Are they all over the world or just here? Or?
No, noise is kind of a new thing. I think noise is, even though it's not all computer oriented, it's sort of a post-computer thing. I mean, people are just experimenting with raw sound, and sometimes it's very dissonant and sometimes it's less dissonant. I'm going to play one of those in Gainesville in a couple of days using this. So I'll do that as my noise thing. So there's a group of musicians that do that. In terms of doing just what I do, there's a couple of percussionists that tour and do improv of various ways. We all seem to be operating slightly differently. I don't know of anyone that does exactly the combination of things that I do. And also, most of us, and me as well, I change all this. The next time I come through next year, none of this will be here. I will have a completely new setup, because about once a year, I rewrite a new set of instruments and try to figure out what I will tour with. This is my touring rig here, this little thing right now. So it collapses fairly small and it's good. The only thing is the NatSod is kind of a failure. The sound is perfect. It sounds exactly like I wanted it to sound. But my initial goal when I built it was to have the whole top flip inside the box and then the top slam on, so it would collapse in like 10 seconds. However, I kept adding all these instruments that fell over the edges, so now I have to take it apart each time, and it takes me about 15 minutes to assemble and deassemble the box. So eventually I'll make one that actually fits with the flip.
I have a couple questions.
Okay.
I love this.
Number one.
I was teaching Well, I'm a performer too, but I was
Uh-huh.
teaching elementary music for 13 years.
Right.
In a style where we were creating and improvising all the time.
Uh-huh.
So this is awesome. What kind of bowls are those? We went to where did you go
These
to find those?
these
Yeah.
are just rice bowls.
Just regular.
Yeah,
rice
they're just
bowls.
rice bowls. They're I mean, ceramic rice bowls. And each of them have pitches, but
Yeah.
they even within the exact same size, they vary a little. So I mean, you have to.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll take a stack of 40 of them and ding, ding. Okay, that's the one. And then you get different sizes and everything. I actually have another set that's bigger than all these.
Oh.
That's another 2 rows of them, but I was kind of at my limits of table size
it
for
was
this.
gorgeous.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, it's really pretty.
And then on the theremin, obviously you're doing the vibrato with
Mhm.
your hand up and down.
Correct.
So then, what happens if you just keep it steady? It's just a solid pitch.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I haven't actually seen it in person. Oh yeah. Got it. Thank you. Yeah,
Not very interesting, but
No, but I wanted to hear it.
I know. I got
And then
it.
the last one is then how do you mic your creative box thing?
It has a bunch of contact pickups
It
inside.
does inside
Yeah.
already.
And then there's actually one there because I couldn't quite pick up this thing well enough. So there's a clip-on one.
Okay, cool.
And all of them run into, I've got a little control box back and back
Oh,
with
I
jacks
see. So your
and,
pickups go to the control box.
volume controls and all that stuff.
Oh, cool. Awesome. This is
Yeah.
great. Thank you for
Uh-huh.
enlightening.
Anybody else?
Just a comment, my lesson in improv, playing a solo, like a guitar solo, is if you hit the wrong note, do it twice.
Yeah. That's the jazz technique.
Yeah.
You do it once, it's a mistake. You do it twice, it's jazz. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he meant to do that. Okay.
And if you do it 4 times, you're just not very imaginative. Anybody else? Well, thank you. Thank you.